Welcome to the English Language Proficiency Assessment Recorded Module Series. This module gives participants an overview of the English Learner Accountability Indicators used by the Idaho State Department of Education to monitor English learner proficiency and growth at the state, district, and school level. The accountability indicators ensures that all children enrolled into an Idaho public school have access to high-quality educational programming and instruction. At the end of this presentation, participants will be able to 1. Identify and describe Idaho's English Learner Accountability Indicators used at the state, district, and school level, and 2. Participants will be able to explain the importance of these indicators as they apply to the monitoring of English learner student performance. Both federal and state laws have been enacted to ensure that all children have an equitable opportunity to meet Idaho's challenging state academic standards and be successful after high school. Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was enacted in 1965 and ensures that all children are provided significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education, and to close educational achievement gaps. The ESEA was reauthorized in 2015 under the Every Student Succeeds Act. The Every Student Succeeds Act stipulates that states' obligations as they pertain to the adoption of English language proficiency standards that are aligned to the state content standards, the administration of an annual English language proficiency assessment, and to the establishment of a statewide accountability system that ensures states, districts, and schools are accountable for improving educational results for all children, including English learners. Within the statewide accountability system, the state establishes long-term achievement and progress goals for subgroups of students, including students who have been identified as English learners. Under the Idaho Administrative Procedures Act, Rule 08-02-03-112, school district, charter district, and public charter school accountability is based on multiple measures aimed at providing meaningful data showing progress towards interim and long-term goals set by the State Board of Education for students' achievement and school improvement. The state accountability framework is used to meet both state and federal school accountability requirements and is broken up by school category and include measures of student academic achievement and school quality as determined by the Idaho State Board of Education. Outlined within the subsections of IDAPA Rule 08-02-03-112 identifies English learner proficiency and growth towards English language proficiency as the accountability indicators. These are the two indicators that are reported on the state report card: percentage of English learners achieving English language proficiency and percentage of English learners meeting English language growth towards proficiency targets. In addition, the State Board of Education sets long-term goals and measurements of interim progress targets toward those goals. The baseline for determining measurable student progress is set by the State Board of Education and shall identify the amount of growth or the percentage of students reaching proficiency required for each intermediate period. More information on how the state calculates growth and percentage of English learners achieving English proficiency can be found within the state's Every Student Succeeds Act state plan. This document is found on the Idaho State Department of Education's webpage. It is important to briefly review the types of student performance scores reported on Idaho's English Language Proficiency Assessment to better understand how each indicator is calculated. Idaho uses WIDA Access as the state's English Language Proficiency Assessment. The assessment measures a child's English language proficiency within 4 language domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. WIDA Access reports student performance as a proficiency level and as a scale score for each language domain. In addition, the language domains are combined to derive composite scores. These composite scores include overall proficiency, oral language, literacy, and comprehension. The 4 language domains and the composite overall scores are used to calculate Idaho's English Learner Accountability Indicators. We will now discuss the 2 English Learner Accountability Indicators and explain how they are calculated. Idaho has 2 accountability indicators for English learners. These are the percentage of students attaining English language proficiency and the percentage of students meeting the expected annual growth towards English language proficiency. Having an established framework of accountability is critical for ensuring students with developing English skills are able to access core academic content and receive educational support to meet their specific needs. The framework ensures districts and schools have valid data to evaluate the effectiveness of their language instruction educational program. The accountability indicators promotes districts to provide high-quality instruction and can drive continuous improvement. The English Language Proficiency Indicator can be summarized as the percentage of students who have met the established exit criteria from a district's language instruction educational program. The exit criteria is listed on the left side of this slide. Students who attain a composite overall English proficiency level of 4.2 or higher, a proficiency level of 3.5 or higher in listening, reading, and writing, and a proficiency level of 1 or higher in speaking are considered as achieving English language proficiency. This indicator is defined as the percentage of English learners meeting English proficiency or exiting a language instruction educational program at a district or school. The growth towards English language proficiency measures whether an English learner is meeting their individual annual progress target as they seek to attain English language proficiency. An English learner's initial English language proficiency level determines the amount of expected growth and total time the student has to reach English proficiency. This accountability indicator only uses the student's overall composite score to calculate whether they have met the growth target. As mentioned in the previous slide, the number of years a student has to exit English Learner Services is based on the student's initial WIDA Access composite overall score. For example, a student who has an initial proficiency level between 1.0 and 1.9 has a total of 5 years to reach English language proficiency and exit from services. However, a student who has an initial proficiency level between 3.0 and 3.9 only has 3 years to attain English language proficiency. To calculate whether a student reached the progress indicator, it is necessary to convert the composite overall proficiency level score into a scale score. For each proficiency level, there is a range of scale scores associated with that proficiency level. The scale score ranges that describe a particular proficiency level change depending on the grade. The growth towards English language proficiency calculation uses the lowest obtainable scale score that is associated with a particular proficiency level to make the accountability indicator calculation. The table on the right illustrates at each grade level the lowest obtainable scale score associated with a composite overall proficiency level of 4.2. This slide gives you an overview of Idaho's approach in calculating growth towards. To better illustrate how the growth towards English language proficiency calculation is operationalized, the next few slides presents an example of how to identify a first grade English learner's growth targets, both as a proficiency level and scale score. In our example, a grade 1 student received a composite overall proficiency level of 2.3 on their first WIDA Access assessment. Using the growth table, the student is placed in the emerging proficiency level. Students with an initial proficiency level of emerging have 4 years to attain English language proficiency. For our example student, to meet the growth indicator in second grade, our student would need to attain an overall proficiency level of 2.5 or higher, highlighted here in green. The lowest obtainable scale score to attain a proficiency level of 2.5 in second grade is 272. Keep in mind that our first grade student would not have a growth score calculated for them in first grade because growth requires 2 scores. So year 1 in the column in the lower table refers to the first year of a student's growth calculation and not the first year that the student is in the program. Our first grade student would need to grow at a minimum 2/10 of a proficiency level from their grade 1 WIDA Access assessment to their grade 2 WIDA Access assessment. In other words, the student needs to go from a 2.3 overall proficiency level to a 2.5 or higher proficiency level. To calculate the amount of scale score increase the student would need to make from first grade to second grade, the proficiency level needs to be converted to their lowest obtainable scale score. To calculate this difference, the initial overall scale score is subtracted from the target overall scale score. The difference is 19 scale score points. Our example student would need to grow at least 19 scale score points to meet the growth towards English proficiency indicator in second grade. If a district wanted to calculate the average yearly scale score increase a student would need within the allocated number of years to reach English proficiency, the following calculation could be performed. Take the difference between the target scale score and the student's most recent scale score, divided by the years the child has left to exit. Here is the average yearly growth calculation put into action for our grade 1 example student. The student is allocated 4 years to achieve English proficiency. Therefore, we would need to know the lowest obtainable scale score for an overall proficiency level of 4.2 in grade 5. A 4.2 proficiency level is a scale score of 365 in the 5th grade. Then we would subtract the initial overall scale score the student received on their first WIDA Access assessment. The child's initial scale score was 256. The product is then divided by the number of years the student has to exit the program. In our example, the student is just entering the program and has 4 years to attain English language proficiency. The result is 23.25. On average, our example student would need to increase 23.25 scale score points each year to exit within their 4-year timeline. Remember, as the child matriculates into higher grades, this average will change based on the child's overall performance on WIDA Access and the remaining number of years left to exit. As the state processes student performance scores from the English Language Proficiency Assessment, there are some business rules applied to the calculations and are important to point out here. If the Idaho State Department of Education approves a district's domain exemption request for a student who cannot meaningfully participate in one or more language domains of WIDA Access, the state uses a modified calculation to derive a composite overall proficiency level score. Outlined within the table on the right, the state allocates the weight of the missing domains across the completed domains. This ensures that these students are eligible to exit the program, and so an overall growth calculation can be calculated. Other business rules applied by the state include: 1. Students must meet the continuous enrollment status outlined in IDAPA Rule 08-02-03-112, subsection B. Only years where a student is continuously enrolled in Idaho schools moves the calculation year forward. 2. A student must complete all domains of WIDA Access. Composite overall score is derived by combining reading, writing, listening, and speaking language domains. 3. Students who attain English proficiency or exit from the district's language instruction educational program automatically meet the growth indicator. 4. Students with an initial proficiency level of 5 or 6 have a growth target to attain English proficiency in the following year. 5. Students meet the growth indicator if they meet or exceed the relevant yearly target in the table. 6. Students who have a missing or invalid score without an approved appeal are considered as not making progress. 7. Students who have a missing or invalid score with an approved appeal are excluded. We hope this module was informative. If you have any questions around the English Learner Proficiency Indicators, please do not hesitate to reach out to the Idaho State Department of Education.